Hey guys, it's Pastor John. Hope you all are having a terrific week. Things are finally starting to thaw out here in Chicago a little bit. We've had just a pile of snow on top of us. It's been a challenging couple of weeks, but it is a blessing for us to be able to have this time together to really consider and continue to study the Gospel of Luke together and to really look at what it means to be a Jesus follower in today's culture. And we're continuing really the beginning of the story. And here in episode 11, as we can continue really our series today, it is an exciting time in the life of Elizabeth and in the life of Zechariah. Because, of course, we are at that point in time when they are going to have a baby, when the baby boy is going to be born. And what an exciting answer to God's promise. I remember the excitement when our little ones were born. Our first two were born at the old Women's Prentice Hospital, which, of course, you can see the brutalist architecture there. So it's a very kind of a stark building, but with a beautiful location right on Lake Michigan. Of course, later they tore that down and built the brand new Prentice Women's Hospital. And that was, again, also our second two were born there, and it was a beautiful place. And I tell you what an exciting time of life. I remember when people would, come down and visit us right after they were born, and just how exciting that is for family and friends to meet the new little ones. Oh, what a blessing it's been for Alana and I to be able to go and visit parents at the birth of one of their children, or at times a number of their different children, and be able to encourage them and be able to just rejoice with them, celebrate with them. Because, of course, the birth of a child is always a wonderful thing. It's always a miraculous thing when the mom and the baby are both healthy. What a beautiful thing that is. Now, in Elizabeth and Zechariah's situation, we remember that this is even a more amazing thing, an even more wonderful thing. Because, of course, Elizabeth was barren. They had tried for years to be able to have a baby and were unable to have a baby. And, of course, in verse 57, we get one of those verses which is just the simple answer, the simple fulfillment of God's promise. One of those simple verses that are just absolutely beautiful. Now the time had come for Elizabeth to give birth, and she had a son. Oh, what a beautiful thing that is. And God kept his promise, that even with their terribly difficult situation, a situation which was impossible for them, a situation which they had dealt with for years, which they had waited and waited for years, which it seems Zechariah had even given up hope that there'd ever be an answer to this problem, to this hurt in their life. Here, God fulfills his promise. Here, God is in the process of accomplishing his purposes, his mission, and he fulfills the promise that he made to them. The whole community around Elizabeth joined in the celebration. In verse 58, it says, "Then her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her his great mercy, and they rejoiced with her." It's a beautiful thing to see the whole community join in on that celebration, join in on that really relational happiness, that joy that's going on there. It's a really special thing. It's always a beautiful thing. I know Dr. Wilder always points out that babies in and of themselves cry a lot and take a lot of work and are a huge challenge, and nobody would celebrate being around a baby for what the baby can offer you. You celebrate being around the baby because of just simply who they are, of just simply the hope and the attachment that's there, because it's a beautiful thing to have a little one. Now, I want to point out the word which her neighbors used, concerning Elizabeth. They're talking about God's great mercy, his eleos. Eleos. Now, it's a word for pity, a word for compassion, for even leniency shown towards an offender by an authority, is how a lexicon would define that. Now, I find that interesting from a couple of different angles. First off, I have a guess here that some of the people there in the community in Judea were reading into the situation, and either Zechariah or more likely Elizabeth had some kind of sin in their life, and that is why they, weren't able to have a baby. That they were attributing that. Now, a lot of times people try to make that kind of equation, right? Something bad is happening in your life, therefore there must be some sin there, which is the cause for that. So that seems to maybe be what the people in that community are kind of implying. But I find it interesting because, of course, I think Luke includes this not as a way of approving of their perspective, but rather as a way of shifting our perspective. Because, of course, we know that when it really boils down to it, none of us actually deserve anything from God. We're all fallen. We're all broken. We all have sin. We all desperately need God's mercy for him not to show the judgment and wrath in our lives that we deserve. And we all desperately need his grace for him to show his favor and kindness to us that we do not deserve. As I look at this, one of the things, anytime you look at a terrible situation in a fallen and broken world, you can know that doesn't necessarily mean, of course, that any particular sin was done by the particular people who are facing the particular problem. What it is a picture of, though, is that we are all fallen, that sin and judgment and destruction are in the world because of our fallen state. And anytime we have a cause to rejoice, anytime we come across grace, anytime we come across God's favor, that most certainly is his mercy. That most certainly is his pity, his compassion. Because none of us, even if we are as righteous as Elizabeth and Zechariah were, none of us deserve anything from God other than judgment. But Luke here is pointing out that God is most certainly merciful. And this idea of mercy is really going to be kind of an underlying theme throughout the Gospel of Luke. That God is merciful, that his grace is available. And what a beautiful thing that God keeps his promises. Now, I do want to point out that those promises aren't always kept precisely when we want them to be kept. I mean, clearly, Zechariah and Elizabeth would have wanted to have had a baby long before this point. In fact, Zechariah seemed to have almost come to the point where he'd given up on even praying about the situation. We do not always receive from God precisely what we want when we want it. And I want to be very, very clear about that. But we can trust that God's going to fulfill his purposes, that his purposes are good, and that he's going to keep his promises to us. And we can trust that. God promises us different things than what he had promised Zechariah and Elizabeth. But we can know that God is trustworthy, that he's faithful, that he will follow through, and that his plan and his timing is always best, that we most certainly can and should trust him. So again, what a beautiful passage today. What a great reminder that we are all in need of God's mercy, and what a just wonderful blessing it's been to spend this time with you here in your lunch hour. So Hope you have a great rest of your day, and the Lord Jesus bless you. Keep following Jesus.